The awakening resistance. The night sky over New Mexico shimmered with stars, their ancient light a silent witness to the events unfolding below. Dr. Elena Reyes squinted through her telescope at Observation Post Delta, tracking what initially appeared to be a meteor. Its trajectory, however, was all wrong. Control, this is Delta. Object is decelerating. I repeat, object is decelerating, she reported, her voice steady despite the implications of her words. Within minutes, military vehicles converged on the predicted impact zone. The object, clearly not a meteor, had carved a half-mile trench into the desert floor before coming to rest. Steam rose from its metallic hull as floodlights illuminated the crash site. Colonel Jack Harris approached the wreckage cautiously, his team of specialists fanning out behind him. "Any radiation?" he asked. "Negative, sir, but we're getting unusual energy readings," replied Lieutenant Jung, studying her instruments. Before anyone could approach further, a section of the hull seemed to liquefy, forming an opening. Weapons were raised, fingers hovering over triggers. From the darkness emerged a figure that walked upright like a human but was clearly something else entirely. Its skin was a pale azure with geometric patterns that pulsed with bioluminescence. Large, multifaceted eyes blinked against the harsh lights. The alien took 3 steps forward before collapsing onto the sand. Dr. Maya Santos, the expedition's xenobiologist, rushed forward despite security protocols. The alien was breathing but clearly injured. Its eyes fluttered open, focusing on Maya with startling intelligence. "Earth found you, finally," it gasped in broken English, shocking everyone present. "I am Toral. Resistance. Dravik Empire comes." Within hours, the world's powers convened an emergency session. Toral had been stabilized and was speaking more clearly now, explaining a reality that would forever change humanity's place in the cosmos. The Dravik Empire rules over 300 star systems. Toral explained to the assembled leaders, his voice translated through a device he carried. "For millennia, they have conquered world after world. My people, the Tyranny, were among the first to fall. I was born in captivity." Screens displayed images of massive ships and alien worlds under the shadow of occupation. The resistance formed from the remnants of conquered civilizations, but we are few, scattered, and losing. "Why come to Earth?" asked the UN Secretary General. "We have barely begun to explore our own solar system. Because you remained hidden, unknown to the Empire until recently. And because you are." Toral searched for the right word, different. Over the following days, humanity learned of their precarious position. The Dravik had detected Earth's radio signals and dispatched a scout ship, which the Resistance had managed to intercept at great cost. Toral's ship, damaged in the battle, had barely made it to Earth with the warning. "You have perhaps 1 orbital cycle, what you call a month, before their invasion fleet arrives," Toral warned. "They will offer terms of surrender first. If rejected, they will demonstrate their power by destroying several major cities. This is their pattern." World leaders debated frantically. Some advocated immediate surrender to spare lives. Others insisted on fighting, regardless of the technological disparity. Dr. Elena Reyes found herself appointed to a special committee tasked with learning everything possible from Toral about Dravik weaknesses. "Their technology is far beyond yours," Toral admitted during one session. "But they have grown complacent over centuries of easy victories. They follow rigid protocols, expecting all species to behave predictably under threat." "And we don't?" Elena asked. "No. I have studied your history. Humans are." He paused again, his facial patterns shifting in what Elena had come to recognize as amusement. "Chaotic. You try solutions no logical species would consider. You keep fighting when defeat is certain. It is irrational. But it might work against the Dravik. It might. It is why I risked everything to reach you." As the deadline approached, humanity prepared in ways both expected and unexpected. Military forces mobilized worldwide, but so did scientists, engineers, hackers, and ordinary citizens with extraordinary ideas. Sarah Chen, a graduate student in materials science, discovered that certain Earth alloys could disrupt Dravic energy fields when configured in specific patterns. Professor Alejandro Diaz found vulnerabilities in the communication protocols Toril had shared. Around the world, humans did what they'd always done when faced with impossible odds. They improvised. In orbit, telescopes detected the first signs of the Dravic fleet, 7 massive ships, each the size of a small city, moving with precision toward Earth. Their first transmission arrived exactly as Toril had predicted. People of Earth, began the tall, gray-skinned being on screens worldwide. I am High Commander Vex of the glorious Dravic Empire. Your world has been claimed for our domain. Surrender now and be assigned appropriate roles within our civilization. Resist and face extinction. You have one planetary rotation to decide. In the secure facility where Toril was staying, he watched the message with Elena and Colonel Harris. Classic Dravic rhetoric, Toril said. They believe fear is the most efficient tool of conquest. What do they know about human history? Elena asked. Very little. They consider you primitive, barely worth studying beyond basic assessment. Colonel Harris smiled grimly. That might be our first advantage. When the Dravic delegation landed the next day to receive Earth's surrender, they were met not by cowering diplomats, but by a unified Earth Defense Council that firmly rejected their terms. The Dravic representatives, clearly surprised by this response, departed without further comment. 6 hours later, precision strikes hit military installations around the globe. The attacks were meant to demonstrate the futility of resistance, but thanks to evacuations and preparations, casualties were minimal. The real surprise came when a squadron of fighter jets, retrofitted with Sarah Chen's disruptive alloy configurations, managed to breach a Dravic destroyer's shields long enough to cause damage. It wasn't a victory, but it was proof that the invincible empire had vulnerabilities. In his recovery chamber, Toril watched the news with widening eyes. No species has damaged a Dravic warship in generations, he whispered. This will confuse them greatly. And confusion, they were learning, was humanity's best weapon against an enemy that had never needed to adapt. Humanity's ingenuity unleashed. The Dravic response to the damaged destroyer was swift and predictable. 3 massive ships moved into low Earth orbit and began systematic bombardment of major cities. The High Command had decided to make an example of the rebellious planet. What they didn't expect was that many of the targets were already evacuated. Underground networks established in the brief preparation period had moved civilians to safety. Even more surprisingly, Earth's primitive defensive systems occasionally penetrated their shields, causing minor but irritating damage. In the command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Fatima Hassan monitored the battle through holographic displays. They're following the exact patterns Toril described, she noted. No deviation even when their tactics aren't working. Elena nodded. The Dravic operate on a strict hierarchy. Lower commanders cannot change strategies without authorization. By the time they receive new orders. We've already adapted, finished Colonel Harris. In orbit, Captain Takashi Yamamoto piloted one of Earth's first space fighters, cobbled together from conventional aircraft and integrated with Toril's technology. His squadron darted between the massive Dravic ships, their erratic flight patterns confusing enemy targeting systems. Remember, he told his pilots, they're expecting us to flee or fight head-on. They've never encountered guerrilla tactics in space. The fighters deployed Sarah Chen's disruptors, while Professor Diaz's team broadcast jamming signals that momentarily confused Dravic communications. In those brief windows, the fighters struck vulnerable points identified by Toril. It wasn't enough to defeat the Dravic, but it was enough to frustrate them. And a frustrated enemy makes mistakes. High Commander Vex paced the command deck of his flagship, the Dominion. Impossible, he hissed to his subordinates. These primitives should have surrendered after the first bombardment. The protocol has never failed. Sir, His second-in-command reported hesitantly, "We're receiving transmissions from multiple resistance cells across the occupied territories. They appear to be coordinating." Vex's gray skin paled further. "Impossible. The resistance was crushed at the Battle of Proxima Centauri." "Apparently not, sir, and they're using our confusion with Earth as a diversion." Back on Earth, Toril had recovered enough to join the command center. His ship had carried more than just a warning. It contained the location of hidden resistance outposts and encryption codes to contact them. For centuries, the conquered species have watched the Dravik, learning their weaknesses while appearing to submit. Toril explained, "We needed a catalyst, something to disrupt their certainty of victory." "And we're that catalyst," Elena realized. "Yes, human unpredictability has created the first cracks in their system. Now we must shatter it completely." The plan they devised was audacious. While Earth forces continued their harassment tactics, resistance cells across the galaxy staged simultaneous uprisings on a dozen Dravik-controlled worlds. The Empire's forces, accustomed to crushing one rebellion at a time with overwhelming force, suddenly found themselves stretched thin. On the 13th day of the invasion, humanity unveiled its most unexpected weapon. It wasn't a superweapon or advanced technology. It was a computer virus developed by a team led by Raj Patel, a former game designer who approached Dravik systems like a puzzle to be solved. The virus, loaded into small drones that attached to Dravik ships during harassment missions, didn't try to destroy their systems outright. Instead, it introduced subtle errors into their targeting algorithms, life support monitoring, and communication protocols. The Dravik, so dependent on their technology working perfectly, had poor error correction capabilities. "Their entire civilization is built on predictability and control," Raj explained. "So we're introducing chaos into their systems, not enough to trigger immediate failsafes, but enough to create cascading errors over time." As the Dravik grew increasingly frustrated with equipment malfunctions and communication failures, they made the critical mistake High Command had hoped for. They sent in ground troops to subjugate Earth directly. The Dravik soldiers, while physically imposing and well-armed, had never faced an enemy that fought from sewers and subways, that booby-trapped buildings, and used civilian communication networks to coordinate ambushes. The invaders had no concept of unconventional warfare, and their rigid command structure prevented adaptation. 3 weeks into the ground invasion, the tide began to turn. Resistance ships, emerging from hiding places across the galaxy, joined Earth's defenders in space. Captain Yamamoto's fighters, now augmented with more of Toril's technology, scored increasingly significant hits against Dravik vessels. High Commander Vex, facing the first real defeat of his long career, made his final error. He recalled his scattered forces to crush Earth once and for all, leaving other occupied worlds vulnerable. As his consolidated fleet prepared a final bombardment, they found themselves surrounded not just by Earth's defenses, but by a coalition of resistance ships from a dozen species. The Battle of Earth, as it would later be known, lasted just 6 hours. When the Dominion's engines failed due to Raj's virus, Earth forces led by Colonel Harris and resistance fighters under Toril's command boarded the flagship. They captured High Commander Vex alive, an unprecedented humiliation for the Dravik Empire. In the aftermath, as the remaining Dravik forces retreated in disarray, representatives from Earth and the liberated worlds gathered to form a new galactic council. Unlike the hierarchical Dravik, this would be a coalition of equals, each contributing their unique perspectives and strengths. "We have existed in the shadow of tyranny for so long," Toril addressed the first council meeting, "that we forgot what freedom feels like. It took humans, newcomers to the galactic stage, to remind us that oppression is not inevitable." Elena, representing Earth at the council, observed the diverse assembly with wonder. "We still have much to learn about the universe," she said, "but perhaps we have something to teach as well." The fall of the Dravik Empire reverberated across the galaxy. Worlds that had been subjugated for generations threw off their chains. Technologies long hoarded by the Empire were now shared freely, and humanity, verily beyond its own planet, found itself at the center of a new galactic renaissance. As starships from a dozen worlds orbited peacefully above Earth, Colonel Harris stood beside Toril at an observation window. "Did you really believe we could do this?" he asked the alien who had risked everything to reach Earth. Toril's bioluminescent patterns pulsed thoughtfully. "I believed you would try something no other species would consider. Whether it would work." His patterns shifted to what Harris now recognized as a smile. That was the beautiful uncertainty that the Dravik could never comprehend.